Welcome back to Firmer Ground from SRM, where we explore trends and strategies impacting the current and future state of financial institutions in North America and across the globe. My name is Neil Doherty, host of today's podcast and Managing Director of Global Marketing at SRM. Every episode features perspectives from the world of banking and financial services, including thought leaders here at SRM, executives at future-thinking financial institutions, and other experts from all corners of the industry. In this episode, I speak with Cynthia Schroeder of Sievewright & Associates, an SRM company. Cynthia joined our professional family after several successful leadership posts in the credit union industry, most recently at Visions Federal Credit Union in New York, where she served as Senior Vice President, Digital Assets. Cynthia and I will discuss her insights on cybersecurity for credit unions and adopting a security-first mindset. We hope you enjoy this conversation. All right. Well, hi, everyone. Neil Doherty here, Managing Director of Global Marketing at SRM. And my guest today in the studio is Cynthia Schroeder. And Cynthia is a strategic advisor at Sievewright & Associates, an SRM company. And Cynthia works with credit union clients on all aspects of digital transformation. She's particularly skilled in the area of info security and cybersecurity risk management, which I'm excited to talk about today. And she brings an insider's perspective, having held management and leadership roles at 4 different credit unions in her career. And prior to joining Sievewright & Associates, Cynthia was Senior Vice President of Digital Assets at Visions Federal Credit Union in Enwell, New York. And she's also a professor at Binghamton University, where she's taught cybersecurity for the last 5 years. So certainly has the full run of experience and perspective on this topic. So we're going to get into Cynthia's insights related to bringing a security-first mindset to credit union operations. And lots of highlights are coming from the recent Sievewright & Associates March Perspectives report, a resource available exclusively to members of their strategic leadership series. So more information on that can be found at sievewrightassociates.com. But without further ado, I wanted to say hello to Cynthia. Welcome. How are you?
I'm great.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me. I know there's a lot going on, but this is a topic that I think is really important to get into. And I know you and I have chatted about this a little bit previously in terms of kind of some of the things that were in the report. And there's a lot there. There's a lot to get into. So you'll forgive me if I have a number of questions that I want to ask today, but hopefully all good things in terms of the items that we want to cover. So if you could first kind of just talk to us a bit about why credit unions are increasingly targets of cybersecurity attacks, that would be helpful. What puts them at risk, maybe more so than some other businesses?
I think it's the credit union's data. The credit unions store and process such large amounts of sensitive financial data, including customer members' personal data, account details, transaction records. And this makes them very attractive targets for cyber criminals who seek to steal this information for financial gain. Some credit unions, especially smaller ones, may not have the same level of security infrastructure and resources as the larger financial institutions.
Right.
And this can make them more vulnerable to attacks if they have weaknesses in their security systems or even if they lack comprehensive cybersecurity measures. It is important to note that while credit unions can be targeted, and they are, many also prioritize cybersecurity and implement robust measures to protect their members' information and assets. They invest in technologies like encryption and firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and regular security audits to detect and prevent cyber threats. They're very similar to many of the banks and the larger banks. I mean, credit unions have a lot of the same security controls. And additionally, credit unions often work closely with industry experts and adopt best practices to strengthen their security posture, which is why having a security first mindset is so important and what it's all about.
Right. And so it sounds like, in your experience, many credit unions are doing the right things and trying to prepare for as best they can, of course, for what's happening tomorrow and all the different attacks and risks that are out there. So you'll forgive me that I'm asking this, but are there any recent cautionary tales that you're aware of that underscore kind of the bigger risk or maybe some of the challenges that are out there for credit unions or some of those, ones that maybe are a little less prepared and what's happening there?
Yeah, I think based on the research that I continue to be involved in and a lot of the discussions with credit unions, I think the risks are very similar to what they encountered in 2022. But I do think that the geopolitical and economic uncertainty are causing a reshaping of the threat landscape, along with threat actors creating new revenue streams. And there's this growing attack as a service threats that are creating a new cybercrime marketplace. So I think those are some of the newer ones. But credit unions are primary targets of cyber attacks like phishing and ransomware and supply chain attacks. And it's mainly due to the highly confidential nature of the data they collect and that they store. And if this data falls into the wrong hands, that outcome can be such a negative impact to the institution's reputation as well as its legal and financial standing. So, these types of attacks aimed at credit unions come at a very high cost. And as technology advances, so have the cyber threats targeting these credit unions. No, the National Credit Unions Administration has continuously encouraged credit unions to strengthen their institution's cyber vigilance and preparedness efforts to protect themselves and their members. And these just the ones that I've already talked about with the phishing and the social engineering and the ransomware, these are the same ones that we've been fighting for years. They just are getting smarter with the attacks against the credit unions.
Right. And I want to go back for a second here. I think I heard you use a phrase. Did I hear it correctly? Attack as a service?
Yes.
Talk to me about that. Can you
Yes.
define that for the audience a little bit?
Yeah, yes. So the attack for as a service is the attack is designed to leak sensitive information such as IP and domain knowledge documentation. And it disrupts the target network operations and it monetizes the attack activity against a ransomware or a DOS attack. So it's just a growing threat, another growing threat that credit unions have to be aware of and they have to protect themselves against.
Gotcha. And you mentioned something just before around the cost piece, and that was going to be one of my questions, right? You know, I think there's a lot of metrics out there around the kind of typical cost of data breaches for big consumer and retail companies. What's the typical cost of a data breach for a credit union? And I think this might have been covered in the perspectives report as well, but can you share a little bit of that with us?
Sure. So there was a study completed by IBM, their security report, and in 2022, the average cost of a data breach reached a record high of $4.35 million. However, many experts estimate that average cost could reach over 5 million in 2023. And data breaches from a phishing attack are estimated at a cost of 4.9 million, and business email compromises, which credit unions suffer, are at a 4.89 million expense. The cost of a data breach can vary significantly depending on various factors, including the scale of a breach, the sensitivity of the compromised data, the size of the credit union, and the effectiveness of the response and the mitigation measures taken. And a data breach can lead to a direct financial loss for the credit unions, can result in legal and regulatory implications, and can significantly impact the reputation of a credit union. And given the potential financial impact of a data breach, credit unions should prioritize investing in robust cybersecurity measures. This is what it's all about when we talk about a security first mindset.
Hmm.
They should have incident response plans and cyber insurance coverage, which is extremely important. In addition to implementing the cybersecurity first mindset through their operations and a comprehensive integration approach to governance, that's where this approach prioritizes security while effectively balancing institution objectives and resources. Now, protective measures to prevent breaches, such as employee training, regular security audits, and implementing industry best practices can also help mitigate the potential costs associated with a data breach.
Yeah, and you said something there that's really interesting, and thank you for breaking that down for us. But one of the things that you mentioned, Cynthia, that I think is really important to call out here is the reputation, which ultimately is kind of the trust factor, right? So, you know, I think it's pretty clear that one of the great value propositions of a credit union is the trust and the familiarity it has with its members, and that there's a cost beyond the dollars and cents of it when those things are compromised, right? In terms of personal data and what have you. So it seems like that's an important point here too, in terms of that kind of, the cost of the reputation slash trust element. Is that fair to say?
Oh, it's a huge cost. I know when I teach a cybersecurity defense program at Binghamton University,
Hmm.
and use a case study of a bank, not a credit union, but a bank that was had a data breach 2 times in 8 months, and it's true. They did. They were hit 2 times in 8 months. They suffered immensely with their reputation, and it took a long time to recover from that. So it's not only just the physical loss of cash or data, or having to reimburse members or send notices out to members about the data breach. It's that reputation that's impacted severely with data breaches.
Right. Okay, I wanted to transition to another question here that I think is important because we're starting to get into this and some of the details you mentioned before, and I asked you to kind of define the what does attack as a service mean. I have to imagine that's one of the many emerging threats to the operational security that face a credit union. Are there other emerging threats, kind of the bigger things that they need to be concerned about that you're seeing kind of more of in terms of just volume and when it comes to breaches and things of that nature?
I think we can't, I mentioned ransomware attacks, and I don't think we can um, leave those to the side because they're not, you don't hear as much about them over the last couple of months, but they're out there and they're still happening. And they really hurt a credit union if they are attacked with a ransomware attack. And that's where they would get in, somehow they would get into their network, and they would get a hold of a server, and they would encrypt that server, and that server most likely has sensitive data, and they wouldn't have access to that server until they either pay with Bitcoin, or they have a really good offline backup that they can recover from. So ransomware is still a concern, along with insider threats, which involve individuals with authorized access to organization systems or data who they misuse or abuse their privileges. Another concerning threat, Internet of Things, is continuing to pick up as new devices coming out are connected back into our Wi-Fi's, and that opens up another threat. We still have cloud security risks as organizations increasingly adopt cloud services. Securing cloud environments become crucial. And then you've got your vendors or your supply chain attacks that aren't going away. So your supply chain attacks target vulnerabilities in your third-party vendors that you don't have control over. And then artificial intelligence and machine learning, while AI and ML technologies offer great benefits for all of us, they also introduce that new security challenge that we have to be aware of.
Yeah, I was going to ask
And
about
then
that one for sure.
yeah, I mean, AI and ML can do great things for credit unions, from improve member experience, operational efficiencies. But any new technology brings another risk that we have to be aware of and we have to be on top of. And I think that's really the importance, Neil, is when you have a security first mindset and an integrated governance environment, you're always considering security at first, at the beginning, not at the end, but always at the beginning. And so if you're rolling out a new product like AI or introducing machine learning, then you also introduce the new security protection at the same time. And that will should keep you protected from the risks that they bring. You also have mobile device, which is constantly a threat, especially with all of the mobile devices in our work lives, whether we're working remote or even in the office. So, to address these threats, organizations, they have to adopt a holistic approach to security. They have to. It's all about including proactive threat intelligence, regular security assessments and audits, employee training, awareness programs, robust access controls, encryption, and strong incident response plan, and collaboration with industry partners, information sharing forums, and just staying updated on the latest security trends. And also, is also essential to the overall operational security. It's just all about a very comprehensive security first program for credit unions because there's a lot to this.
Yeah.
And if they had a program that they are all following and they're all familiar with or all aware that security comes first, it's built in.
I love it. I feel like you just broke down like the main attributes of that security first mindset for our listeners, which
Yeah.
is fantastic. And it's, it's pretty comprehensive. But at the same time, I have to imagine, some of those elements could be more or less difficult for a credit union to onboard or to, create some sort of, kind of change management mindset toward. Are there kind of typical roadblocks that you see credit unions face when they look to move to a security first approach? Is there anything that is fairly typical that can be overcome? I'm just curious because you sort of broke down the what you need to do, but I think we all know that sometimes it's easier said than done to get there and to get there fast. So I'm just curious, are there those kind of typical roadblocks that you've seen credit unions face when it comes to changing their mindset, adopting that security first mindset, and effectively operationalizing it, right? So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are many roadblocks. It's very easy to talk about, but it's very hard to implement. But credit unions may encounter so many roadblocks when they're trying to adopt a security first approach, and these roadblocks can arise due to various factors, including resource constraints, your organizational culture, and the evolving cybersecurity landscape. Limited resources, definitely. Credit unions, especially smaller ones, may face challenges in allocating sufficient resources to cybersecurity initiatives, or they lack awareness and training. A security first approach requires a well informed and trained workforce. However, the credit union may face roadblocks in providing comprehensive cybersecurity education and training to all of their employees, and it needs to be all of the employees. And then you have your legacy systems. They may rely on legacy systems and outdated infrastructure that lack built in security features and may have vulnerabilities. And then you've got your balancing of your convenience and your securities. So credit unions strive to provide convenient and seamless services to their members. However, there could be tension between convenience and security. And I've seen it in action. There definitely is tension. You've got your compliance burden, like your organizational culture and buy-in, which I talked about. And then just that overall evolving cybersecurity landscape, which is continuously evolving with new threats, attack vectors, regulatory changes emerging, and trying to stay abreast of all of these changes and adapting security measures accordingly can be really significant of a challenge for credit unions, especially those without a dedicated cybersecurity without that dedicated cybersecurity expertise.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's no shortage of challenges there when it comes to getting where you need to be, and it's interesting because you kind of mentioned that challenge between sort of convenience and locking things down. You talked a little bit before about insider threats, which is always one that just is so makes me so curious in terms of how to kind of manage against that. And then you also introduced this concept in the report of zero trust architecture. So I was hoping you could explain for us a little bit of what that means, how it's adopted, and kind of what are the generally accepted pros and cons of going down that path as part of your security first approach.
Sure. So, zero trust architecture is an approach to cybersecurity that challenges the traditional perimeter based security model. It assumes that an organization should not automatically trust anybody, any user, any device, the network, whether inside or outside their boundaries. Instead, it emphasizes verifying and validating every access request and transaction, regardless of its origin or location. And there's several key principles to zero trust architecture: least privilege, meaning users and devices are granted only that minimum level of access required to perform their tasks. And they have the micro segmentation, which networks are divided into smaller segments or zones, only allowing granular control over access between those different resources. Continuous authentication involves continually validating and verifying the identity, excuse me, and the security posture of users and devices throughout their session. You have the MFA or multi-factor authentication. You have constant security monitoring and analytics. So there's a lot to this, and the pros are improved security, enhanced visibility and control, flexibility and agility. But you do have the cons, which are complexity. It's very complex, and the user experience impact and the overall operational overhead. So there's some great things with implementing this, but there's also, it offers such significant security benefits, and it's essential to consider the needs of and capabilities of the organization before it would be implemented. Proper planning, phased implementation, and user-centric design can help mitigate potential challenges and maximize the advantages of zero trust.
So it sounds to me like, obviously there's a technology element to it. There is a kind of a compliance and process elements to everything that's happening operationally. What's your take on, are there enough people, enough human resources to out there to fill these types of positions to uphold something like zero trust architecture or be the architect of how it's going to work for that organization?
No, that's one of the biggest challenge, at least in my experience and what I've heard from a lot of colleagues, is trying to find the staff you need to implement a technology like this, which is a complete change. It would be a complete change for a credit union to implement zero trust architecture, and they would need very talented staff to be able to do it. And trying to get that staff under cybersecurity, trying to hold on to those staff, retain the staff, it's a nightmare for a lot of credit
Right.
unions. There's positions when I was at my last credit union, we had cybersecurity positions open for year, 2, 3 years before we could fill them. And then we would bring them in and we'd train them and we'd have them get them certified, and then they'd be poached. They would be taken away. And it's a constant nightmare for credit unions to hold on to the staff and have the staff to be able to do the things that they need to do to protect their member data.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a theme that transcends industry at this point. But I was just curious if if that was another challenge in the mix, and it sounds like it is. Um,
It's huge.
One other thing that I believe you had mentioned as kind of a potential roadblock to adopting that security first mindset is around the idea of just general resistance to change. And I wonder, just based on your insider perspective as a credit union leader, executive, and technologist, is that a legitimate challenge still in the credit union space, just the same as it would be in any other space? Is it any more, any less? I'm just curious if that plays a big part in 2023, or is that maybe less of the case compared to some of the other challenges that face a credit union to get to the top of the hill when it comes to the security first mindset?
No, I think change management and change overall for credit unions, and I believe for most any organization, is a constant battle, is a constant challenge. I mean, and I think from the security side, I believe in security first. I have my entire well, I don't know if it was my entire career, but at least the last 20 some years, security has been extremely important. So I look at security before I look at anything else when I want to implement something new. But not everybody does that, because you have different mindsets and you have different individuals and different roles. So if you're out there and you're really trying to bring in new services and new features, you don't want to be bogged down by having to worry about security, because it can bog you down in that work. And you don't want to have to implement something and have all these security features that make it not easy to use. So it really ends up being a compromise. And that's where it's hard for people to change in that aspect, because they don't want to think differently. Sometimes they don't want to think differently about how they should be thinking differently.
Right.
When you look at something and you're implementing a new product or service, you want to implement that new product and service fully, and you want it to be easy to use for the members and easy to use for the employees. But there has to be security built into that, and sometimes that security may slow it down. make it not as easy. And that's hard to swallow if you're really interested in bringing in new business and services with that new product. So I think that's where that change fight, that fight comes into play with that change is changing it and looking at it, trying to look at it with a different mindset, trying to just build in that security right from the beginning all the time, no matter what, every new product, every new service, every new change that you do. But that's really hard. It's very hard.
Right. But it occurs to me, you said something interesting, right? When you talked about your own experience that, for the last 21 years, you've operated that way. And it makes me wonder or ask the question, which is like, was there a particular moment or something that, happened on the job for you where at some point, I think it happens to a lot of folks. I know for myself, having experience working in a larger corporation that both valued and almost required more of a security first mindset than maybe smaller organizations. There were moments that I saw where it was like, okay, I now understand why why we lock our desktop and we walk away from our workspace or what have you, the simple things, right? But it makes me wonder, was there a moment that the sort of a revelatory moment for you where you said, you know what, this has to be the way that I think before I adopt something?
I think it was really when the security breaches started. Because it used to be we were completely open. And especially in IT. In IT, your employees, you had small IT teams, and your employees were trained to do everything. They had every privilege they needed to get into every system. They could do everything. They were completely open, and a lot of our systems were completely
Right.
open. We didn't lock anything down over 20 years ago. We were very open, but then the breaches started, and then you started having to clean up messes because somebody left their computer unlocked. Somebody went to their computer and they did something they shouldn't do. Then you started seeing all that. So, and I've always been on the IT side. So I've always had to be the one to, be involved in cleaning it up and putting in new controls and new processes. And so I think, that is why for years, I've always thought security first in everything that I do. And I've tried to, push it and push it and push it. But if you're not on that side, Neil, I don't think you see it that way. And until you have that aha moment, I don't think employees see it that way. They just see it as a burden. It's a burden.
Right, but I like to believe that after someone might listen to a conversation like this, then they could be influenced to think that way, right? And that's, I just
Yes.
think it happened. It probably happened to you. It happened to me, where I've, you saw a moment, or you listened to someone who understood the bigger picture a little bit better, and it was influential in helping you change some of your kind of basic behaviors as it relates to, security when it comes to the technology that you use in the professional space. So, I know I've thrown a lot of questions at you so far, Cynthia, and you've done an amazing job at answering them, by the way. Thank you. So I've got one more question for you, which is, um, you know, credit unions aren't just responsible for the operational security, right? But the data and personal information of their members. And how do you see a security first commitment ultimately impacting the members of the credit union? How is that a value proposition to them?
I think that is one of the most important things of a security first commitment by credit unions, because it can have such a significant positive impact on their members. By prioritizing the security of members' data and that personal information, credit unions can enhance that trust, which is so important to credit unions. They can protect against potential breaches, and they can provide a safer environment for their members' financial transactions. Data protection and privacy. Credit unions that adopt a security first mindset prioritize that protection of that member data and that personal information, and they can make sure that they keep that data private and protected for the members. It also demonstrates a credit union's commitment to safeguarding its members' interest. It includes proactive measures to detect and prevent fraud, and it's about security best practices, potential threats, and the ways that we work to protect that data is really important. And it shows that, if a credit union really builds in a security mindset, it will be apparent to their members that they've done so, especially in all of their products that they roll out when they move into mobile and, and digital banking more, and they do, all of these new things that are coming out. They implement security right from the beginning. It's going to be noticeable to those members.
So I fibbed a little bit because I'm going to ask a follow-up question, but this will now be the last question. But it's something that just came from that answer, which is, do you think that credit unions are also doing a good job of communicating how they're protecting their members' interests? Is that a big priority in their communication stream at the moment?
If it's not, it should be. And I think I know a lot of credit unions are being pushed to do so through their regulators. So the regulators will ask to see what type of communications and education are you providing your members and your employees, which is good, because when you're asked, then you know that you're going to implement it by the next year. You're going to have something in place. So I think once NCUA and some of the other regulators started requesting that we educate our members, then we all started to put more emphasis on educating our members through emails, through pop-ups when they log in, through website information, through financial magazines if they have one. Those are some of the ways that I've seen education be done for members. And videos.
Mhm.
Videos are a great thing. There's a lot of offerings out there now by fintechs that you can put great videos out there for your members to increase their security.
That's great. And I think it's just one of those scenarios where, the more that they invest in it operationally, obviously the better it is to share that and to help people understand the investment that's being made as part of the overall operational, not just a budget, but the way that effort and time is spent. So certainly something that I just wanted to follow up on there. So I appreciate you tackling that one. All right. Well, a lot of intriguing, thorough information here. Asked a number of questions. I think there's some great stuff here. I'm sure we're just kind of scratching the surface to a degree. So I appreciate you coming on, Cynthia. Thank you for joining me, walking through this topic with me, enlightening me and educating me a little bit, and hopefully our listeners. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the time with you, Neil.
Awesome. And I certainly would encourage anyone who's interested in more about this topic to reach out to Cynthia directly via LinkedIn or through email, or check out the Sievewright and Associates website to learn how you can become a member of the Strategic Leadership Series. Again, the perspective reports that are issued often cover trending topics like this particular one, adopting the security first mindset. So thank you everybody for listening to Firmer Ground, and goodbye for now. And thanks again, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Firmer Ground from SRM. Please stay tuned for our upcoming podcast. Until then, you can visit us at srmcorp.com or on LinkedIn and Twitter.